Welcome to Not Entirely Unlike Tea with Christine Collins. Hey there, it's Christine Collins, and today we have a very interesting topic around peopling and the difference between introverts and extroverts and how they experience it from a neuroscientific standpoint. So when we are socializing, our prefrontal cortex, our executive control center, is really working in overtime, juggling all kinds of different tasks simultaneously. Things like tracking facial expressions, interpreting tone of voice, trying to decipher someone's meaning in their words and their language, while monitoring their body language, as well as filtering out background noise, environmental atmosphere, potential threats, holding on to various different conversational threads and keeping track of those in your working memory, and then also planning what you're going to say next while regulating your own emotional responses and your own facial expressions. And all together, that's a lot of very intensive cognitive work. And all of that cognitive load that's happening in the prefrontal cortex requires a lot of metabolic demand in order to have that sustained social interaction. So you're burning through energy, you're consuming glucose, and when that social scenario is prolonged, the glucose levels start to drop. Additionally, glutamate accumulates in the lateral prefrontal cortex, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter. And so when there's a lot of it hanging around, it can actually become toxic and disruptive. It's something that we ultimately need downtime in order to clear out. So we're getting into having some depleted resources. We may be needing fuel and reinforcements. There can also be some cortisol release, the stress hormone. So even if you're doing something that is a fun social interaction or it's enjoyable, those stress systems are still activated to some degree and can stay elevated for hours after that event or interaction ends. And if you build in an interaction that's challenging in any way, cognitively challenging, emotionally challenging, mentally challenging, that can even further increase that cortisol release and the elevation of some of those mechanisms that ultimately cause you to feel drained and tired afterwards. The interesting thing is that people experience this in slightly different ways, and to some extent it can be connected to whether or not they identify as an introvert or an extrovert. There are actual neuroscientific differences in how they feel after they have a lot of social interaction. So one element in play with those differences is to do with dopamine, thought of as a feel-good neurotransmitter, reward and motivation and pleasure. There are differences in how introverts and extroverts actually experience that. Their sensitivity to it may be different. Extroverts may have more dopamine receptors and they may be less sensitive to dopamine, which means they need more stimulation in order to experience a dopamine hit. So the social interaction, the novelty, the excitement, the unpredictability, all of the things that can be a part of a social interaction helps to trigger dopamine release for them, and they light up with reward signals. And that novelty in particular, like meeting new people, can create enough of a level of stimulation in order for them to experience a dopamine hit. So whereas an introvert might find that very difficult or tiring or draining, the extrovert may find it stimulating and pleasant. So on the other end of that spectrum, someone who's highly introverted is very sensitive to the dopamine. Too much stimulation actually overstimulates them in a similar way to having too much sugar or too much caffeine. Instead of feeling energized, they feel overwhelmed. It's too much. They need to step away. And the fuel is a little bit different that's being used, where they're using acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter that's also linked to pleasure, but works differently. Acetylcholine makes us feel better when we turn inward, when we think deeply or reflect, or even focus intensely on just one thing for a long period of time, like having a specific hobby or leisure activity that's more quiet and very enjoyable for that person. They also prefer not being bombarded by external stimulation. Introverts also have thicker gray matter in the prefrontal cortex. The areas in particular are associated with abstract thought and decision making. There's more neural tissue that's devoted to a deeper processing, reflection, introspection, and information has a longer, more complex pathway through the introverted brain and goes through areas around memory, planning, and problem solving. So obviously these things are strengths. They are highly valuable skills, unfortunately sometimes undervalued in particular scenarios, but being gifted and skilled in memory, planning, and problem solving are very beneficial. And because there's more neural tissue devoted to processing things at deeper levels, they may tend to be more reflective, more self-reflective, more introspective, and offer insights that other people may not be able to offer. At the same time, social interaction requires more cognitive resources. The brain is doing more extensive processing of every social cue, every comment, every piece of information that's being taken in, and overall that requires more processing power, more cognitive load that can make one feel more drained. Whereas extroverts have thinner gray matter in the prefrontal region. They process information in a shorter, quicker pathway, so they may be faster to react, they may be more spontaneous, they may be less prone to overthinking. Of course, that varies by person, and they may be capable of juggling multiple social streams using the same cognitive load and without getting as drained. So both have different skill sets, different strengths, and then different areas where certain things may be more of a struggle. Introverts may make more long, processed, carefully reflected on, well thought out decisions. Extroverts may be more spontaneous, but at the same time, more capable of managing social interaction. So both bring different skill sets and valuable resources to the table, but each may need to process social interaction differently and recover from it differently. So in terms of managing that neural drain, there are things that can be done both before and after a peopling or social interaction time to protect the brain's resources and to replenish them afterwards. So beforehand, avoiding overly demanding cognitive work just before a big social interaction, particularly for an introvert, because the brain needs its glucose reserves and its energy sources. Also building in buffer time, allowing spaces in between interactions where possible, giving maybe 30 minutes of quiet before having to go and be on with other people, and then allowing the nervous system to kind of settle into a calmer baseline before stepping into that interaction, and then doing the same thing if they're going to be multiple, having like buffer zones in between to allow some downtime to replenish. Also looking after eating protein, complex carbs, giving the brain the fuel that it needs, and then setting realistic expectations for the interaction. Having boundaries, deciding when to leave, permission to leave early, permission to set parameters around what those interactions will look like and how much of you is required for them. And then there's the aftercare side, where having some downtime following an intense, especially if it's a challenging social interaction, quiet, low light, low key environments, helping to calm down that overstimulated nervous system. Things like avoiding screens or other stimulation can be helpful, particularly social stimulation like social media, because your brain has already been peopling and socializing for that period of time, and it needs a true break from that cognitive load. Also, movement, a gentle walk or yoga or some exercise or something that helps to clear out some of those metabolic byproducts and also reduce cortisol and stress. Protein, hydration, helping the brain to replenish what it has spent. So eating well, drinking plenty of liquids, water, giving yourself time. A lot of people find that they need a day or two after a big event or party or social interaction to recover from from those intense social events. And it also depends on, to some extent, how enjoyable or unenjoyable that interaction was. You may need more time if it was particularly challenging in some way. But even the fun things can leave you feeling drained and tired and may need more downtime after. Taking breaks during the event, stepping away for 5 minutes here and there, can be very helpful for just getting a little quiet time to yourself, even if it's only a few minutes, and taking tiny resets to kind of extend your social capacity and to replenish yourself in between. And if you are looking for additional tools that are wonderful for rejuvenating and replenishing neural resources, one of the very best tools for that is Yoga Nidra and also hypnosis. Yoga Nidra is wonderful for being restorative, relaxing, and very soothing to the nervous system, particularly following a stressful or high cortisol inducing event. Hypnosis also can be beneficial not only for the relaxation side, but also for shifting beliefs and stories around what happened, what is happening, what may happen, worries and anxiety, and resetting some of those beliefs that can interplay with how enjoyable or unenjoyable a social interaction can be. Using these tools in combination is even more powerful, which is one of the reasons why I offer both, along with EFT tapping, which is also fantastic for resetting the nervous system, and meditations and visualizations in my monthly membership, the Hypno-Pothecary or the Poth. And all of that information is available to you in the show notes. And I hope you found this interesting, and until we connect the next time, I wish you the most magical and creative rest of your day. Thanks for listening. This is Christine Collins at RavenMosaic.com.